You are listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
Welcome to the Final Say Radio Show. It's great to have you. And I've been reading your article, and I'm so glad that you wrote this. And it's another one of these programs that, you know, maybe it's not broken completely today, but it sure is close. And you've pointed out some of the figures and the timeline. And so I'm glad that you're able to join us. But I have a question right off the bat. The SSDI numbers that are included in the federal program, is some of that money that gets transferred from the federal government to the states for their state programs?
No, it's administered at the federal level. So it's not like a block grant like what is a block grant?
Like part of the
like
Medicare,
what the general welfare program, where that state's administered. This is all administered at the federal level.
Wow, so this is an even bigger problem when you add in the states.
Yes. Well, states, generally, like the program that the states like to use, it's similar to disability insurance, is they'll use workers' compensation, which will be paid out of a state fund to basically tide over long-term injured workers until they either run out of benefits or go back to work.
Very interesting. So at the beginning of your article, you clue us in that this program has ballooned into $135 billion. That's $135 billion a year? Yeah,
and it's growing even larger. If by 10 more years from now, if nothing is done, it will be close to $200 billion. And let me tell you where we came from. We came from about $50 billion from 1995. So it's a significant increase. We have actually has doubled since 1995. And thinking back, it's actually multiplied 6 times since 1970 when there was only 1.4 million people in the program. Remind your listeners that there's nearly 10 million people in the program today.
Okay, so you and I could both agree that it is an important program. It's a program that, of course, the federal government should have, in our opinions, to help the very people who really need it. But there are a lot of problems with the program, aren't there?
Yeah, and the problem is that people stay on the program long term. The problem is that we don't get people off the program. And the problem is that there is probably a portion on the program that are on it fraudulently. And there needs to be more controls in place into getting those people who are on the program off of it, and those people who are on the program are on it fraudulently for them to never get on the program. So there needs to be some oversight into how people apply for the program and how people get off of it.
So you've pointed out that we have approximately 8.7 million people that are on this federal disability insurance program, and you've also pointed out that that's approximately the size of New York City, which is just really incredible.
Yeah, and it's even grown bigger today. I mean, that was a number from 2012. I think it's up to 10 million now.
Wow.
So it's growing at sort of a breakneck speed, and the program is slated to be insolvent by 2016. And so by that time, you know, we will have exhausted the trust fund, and we won't be able to make the payments as they're paid today. So the average benefit is about $1,130 a month. So the options will be those who are on the program will get a reduced benefit somewhere in the nature of 75 to 80% of what they're currently paid, or we'll have to raid another trust fund to cover up the difference. And we don't want to see that happen. We want to see some reforms to get this program back into a path of fiscally responsible. I think I'm having some technical difficulties here.
MacMillin, Brett's line dropped. This is Mark. I'm in the screen. I'm the one who screwed up the call-in.
Do you need me to call in, or am I on the radio or am I on the show right now?
We're on the radio right now. We're live, and I'm just waiting for Brett to call back. There he is. Okay, Brett, you're live.
Wow, we are having all kinds of technical problems today.
We are. Okay, you're live.
You know, here I am. I'm talking about how great the weather is today because it's been an incredible run the last week or two. But evidently we're having all kinds of technical issues as well. But anyway, sorry about that, MacMillin.
Oh, no problem.
So when I'm looking at this, I did a quick calculation, and I took the figure that you put out, the $135 billion divided by 8.7 million people, and I'm coming up with about $15,500 per person, you know, if it was, you know, evenly distributed. And of course, we know, you know, from what you've just told us that there are more people and we're also spending more on it. But that's an awful lot of money each and every year for the taxpayers to be giving through a program to somebody to, you know, essentially live off of. And the problem is that I could understand where we have a certain percentage of our population that really needs help and they may not have anywhere else to turn. But I'll tell you from personal experience, I've met quite a few people who have taken advantage of programs and systems like this where they sprain an ankle at work and they never go back. I mean, just things that you would be like, well, we've had far worse happen to us and we have to go to work because no one else is going to pay our bills.
Yeah, and you sort of hit the nail on the head with that comment there. The problem is sort of the benefits are almost overly generous. Your back-of-the-envelope calculation is almost exactly right. The average benefit for a single person is $1,130 a month, which totals to about $13,560 a year. That can be inflated if you have a child that you're responsible for, or if you have some blindness or some other disability. It can be inflated a little bit. But that number is $2,000 a year more than the federal poverty level for a single person, and only $2,000 less than full-time wage earner at minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. So the benefits are relatively generous. And if you're looking historically back, in 1960, the benefits were $560 a month, and so today it's an increase of 98%, which you think about, oh, it's 1960, it's not that big of a deal, but the key, real kicker here is that the federal minimum wage, conversely, has fallen in terms of real purchasing power over the same period of time, so it actually is a lot more money than it was historic. And then you sit to hit, so that is an important metric to measure right there.
Yeah, and furthermore, when you look at the, I think you have to look at the age of when people are retiring and their situation, because, you know, potentially as we're living longer, which I think is putting a greater strain on the program, if you have an injury or something where you leave work at 40 and you never work again, you could potentially spend 40, 50 years, possibly more, collecting disability payments, and that adds up to an incredible amount. And additionally, when you add up what the average person is paying in taxes, how many people does it take paying taxes in general to cover $15,000 a year per person? I mean, it covers quite a few.
It covers quite a few wage earners, and the problem is, every person you put on the program, you take money out of the trust fund, and then you can make it less and less solvent as long as if they never go back to work. And sort of the question you asked about the number of young people on the program, in 1970, just 1.3% of adults between the ages of 20 and 64 were SSDI beneficiaries. Today, that number has crept up to almost 5%. And those people will likely be long-term disabled. So once they get on the program, they'll never get off as long as they qualify, which is troubling.
And so my next question would be, what are the qualifications right now, and have the qualifications been lowered, which I'm guessing is the reason why there's so many more people on it?
They have been lowered in a way. So the qualifications now, so in 1956, Congress created Title II of the Social Security Act, which created SSDI. And the program, as you know, is financed by able-bodied workers that could provide economic assistance for workers over the age of 50 whose injuries have left them, and this is a quote right from the statute, long, continued, and indefinite periods of disability. So you have to be disabled for over a year in order to start collecting on the program. And so you have to be under the full retirement age of 66, have worked for 40 quarters, 20 of which have been earned in the last 10 years prior to your disability. So in essence, you have to be working for a significant period of time in order to qualify for this. And then you're also, if you're on the program and you're over the age of 50, you are pre-qualified for Medicare. And by putting a lot more people on the Medicare program, that has added quite a significant amount of strain to that program, which is not too healthy in and of itself. But to getting back to your original question, has it become easier to qualify for Social Security disability insurance? And the answer is a little bit. So in 1984, Congress made a reform, and they said there's an additional number of illnesses and classifications that you could qualify for the program. Some of which were you couldn't qualify under certain illnesses, but if you took those illnesses together, that qualified as a disability. So you couldn't qualify under, say, for instance, you had a heart attack. But if you had a heart attack and you had a stroke and you had high blood pressure and you had some sort of musculoskeletal disability, then you could be qualified as disabled. So there was a lot more subjectivity brought into the system. And as a result, in the mid-'80s, the number of people with musculoskeletal injuries, just like soft tissue damage and back pain, went up 323% over a 5-year period of time.
Wow.
And the other interesting tidbit here is, if you read it in our report, there was another significant reform in the 1990s where Congress kicked off all the people who listed drug and alcohol abuse as their qualifying disability. And you would have thought to yourself, that was a reasonable request. Well, 2/3 of the 130,000 people who were kicked off the program were able to qualify underneath a different ailment. So, there's some reforms, and some reforms clearly are not working at all and need to be reformed in a more meaningful way.
So those are some pretty interesting problems that we have with the program. When I look at this, I look at the funding of all of these types of programs, from Social Security to this to Medicare, Medicaid, now Obamacare. And the biggest problem is that when Social Security started, initially, just for the first brief period, there were quite a few workers per one person that was drawing from the system. Then it quickly became, I think, about 40 to 1, then maybe like 35 to 1, 20 to 1. But we're at a point now where it's like approximately 2 people paying in for one person drawing out. And that you're at a point where all of these systems, especially when you pull them all together, it's not sustainable without severely or drastically raising the level of taxation on the American people. And I think that is what we need to address. Not just, okay, how could we lower benefits to people, or how do we raise taxes, but how do we look at these programs and say, who's really qualified, who should the programs really be geared for, and what other ways could we go about helping people that may need it, maybe whether through private means or charity or nonprofits or things of that nature.
That's exactly right. And one of the reforms that we'd like to see implemented, and this is a reform that the Norwegians did when they had huge disability rolls, and they were very successful in reducing them, is to add an experience rating for disability payroll taxes. So in essence, you'd have employers who kept individuals with disabilities on the job. They would be rewarded with lower taxes, while those who shipped workers onto SSDI could foreseeably pay more. So you give incentives for those in the private sector to keep those moderately disabled people working, or to slot them into a position where you could have a disabled person. Or another reform could be to require employers to carry private disability insurance to cover benefits for a short period of time until Social Security disability insurance took over. So you wouldn't have people on the SSDI payroll for a significant period of time like you do today. It can't be lost on the taxpayers here that the private disability programs are really good at getting people back to work. More than half of them go back to work. A lot less than half of them on SSDI go back to work. So the private sector is doing something right with getting their people back to work, but the taxpayers aren't. So we need to find ways to incentivize, those moderately disabled people to work, and to ensure that the people who are on the program are really disabled, and that those are the ones that truly need it.
That's great to know. Now, I've received quite a few emails from various members of Congress in both parties talking about, dealing with Social Security and Medicare. Of course, each party has their different tactic. One wants to raise taxes or raise the dollar amounts that we're taxing people up to. In other words, we're not going to cap Social Security anymore and things of that nature. But are any members of Congress specifically dealing with the SSDI program? Yeah,
Coburn has worked on this issue off and on for the last few years. There's actually a bipartisan bill, I think it's S-1099, that would make sure that those who are receiving both unemployment benefits and Social Security disability benefits, that they're not double dipping. Believe it or not, that there's about $850 million over the last couple of years that went out the door of those who were taking advantage of both programs. So that's a loophole that needs to be closed immediately. But short of that, there hasn't been a lot of wholesale reform in this issue, which is sort of surprising given the fact that it's going to be bankrupt in 2016. So the purpose of our campaign is really to inform people about where the problems lie, offer some meaningful solutions so they can become educated, and they could go back to the members of Congress and say, look, these are the ways you can reform this program, and I'm in support of those.
Great. MacMillin, if you can take a few minutes and tell us a little bit about our generation and what you guys are doing, and that would be great.
Yeah, Our Generation is a 501c4. We're a nonprofit watchdog group, and we're mostly made up of seniors from around the country. We're based here in the Washington, D.C. area, actually inside the Beltway. But we're working for preserving Social Security, making sure that the retirement security for the seniors are there while reforming the programs that are wasteful. We're also involved in creating term limits at both the state and federal level for elected officials, and making sure there's a federal spending freeze. So all good government issues to make sure our country is better than the generation that we founded.
Oh, that's fantastic. And where could people find out more about your organization?
OurGeneration.org or ReformSSDINow.org.
Okay, fantastic. And I hope I had your name correctly. Slobodien?
Slobodien, yep, you're close enough.
Slobodien, okay. Anyway, MacMillin Slobodien, who is the Executive Director with Our Generation, they're working on this Reform SSDI Now project. I want to thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to speaking to you again.
Thank you very much for having me on the show. I had a great time.
All right, take care.